Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure many of you are freaking out because my autoplay turned back on, but have no fear. Today is Day 9 Daily number 69. Coming right up. Whoopsie daisies, a little bit off camera. It's February 15th currently, where I'm living out in the sunny, nice, wonderful California. I'm realizing right now that I just cooked some green tea and accidentally left the green tea in the microwave. So, maybe I'll be coming back to get that at some point in time, maybe not. Probably I'll be so enthralled in the midst of discussing Starcraft 2 that I won't be able to, but that's okay because I got a little bit of cold water. Oh, it's so good. Alright, sweet. Today, we're going to be looking at the Starcraft Battle Report 3 in high definition. And some people are having some concerns, though, because they're saying, oh my god, but, so much has changed since then. Absolutely, there's been a lot of changes. Actually, some units have different names than what are in here. But I think it's important that we all stop thinking like designers, because that's what we've gotten to do for the last 4 or 5 years that StarCraft 2's been in development. We've all got to be like, oh my god, they put this in. Like, I heard people in the channel freaking out because Overlords don't have detection currently, or perhaps in some build they didn't. I'm actually unaware of this. But this is the thing you have to remember. StarCraft 2 is a different game from StarCraft 1. Be careful when you're applying StarCraft 1 concerns to StarCraft 2. You can. I mean, that's actually what I'm about to do, so don't be too concerned with it. But don't say that something is bad because of reasons in StarCraft 1. You can use the tools you developed in StarCraft 1 to think about StarCraft 2, but never use the rules that you've developed in StarCraft 1 and apply them to something different. So remember, we are going to take off our designer hats, right? We're going to put away the designer bearskin rug and put out our how do we win in this game bearskin rug. So all we're going to be looking at is what is the right and wrong thing to do, how are we going to think about strategy, what are all those sorts of considerations that we're going to make. Let's not worry too much about whether anything's balanced or imbalanced. Actually, I'm going to come back to that. Because I think it's a pretty important point there, because there's really only so many times that you can say, oh, blah, blah, blah is imbalanced, before it actually starts subconsciously affecting your play. The people who are always like, oh my god, Protoss vs. Zerg, it's imbalanced, LOL. But then they actually go play Protoss vs. Zerg, and they start losing a lot, and rather than try to solve the problem, they just go, well, it's just this imbalance, I'll never overcome it, and then they sort of give up trying, or they just curse themselves, and we don't want that. Whoops, almost did the 2D mix here. See, look at this, I can come up from here. Ooh, let's actually just go to the main screen. So this is the Battle Report 2 coming up, and don't worry that a lot of the stuff is different, or a lot of the stuff has changed over time. Because everything that we discussed today is still going to be useful and important. And in the first battle report, I actually was completely cold. I knew nothing at all about StarCraft 1. I literally had never read a single forum post. I had never looked at a single unit name. I'd watched no videos. The only experience I'd had with StarCraft 2 was seeing StarCraft 2 out of the corner of my eye at BlizzCon while I was eating some hot dogs. And also sitting in line so I could read the tech trees. But that literally is it. However, I've done a little bit more research this time, and I know a little bit more about the game. So this map, actually, that they're playing on is called Scrapyard. I actually have the map loaded up in good old Day 9 Daily fashion. First of all, I have this guttural, I want to puke when I see this, because it looks like Paranoid Android. Again, I'm not going to apply my StarCraft 1 logic here and say it's bad as a result, but I had a lot of struggles playing on Paranoid Android. If any of you don't know what I'm talking about, go up to the Team Liquid Pro Gamer database, look it up. There's a nice short rush distance right here that I'm noticing, but they cleverly put these destructible rocks in between. So early on, it's a slightly longer rush distance. I think that's very, very cute. We have a natural expansion here, but notice how weakly defended our natural is. We actually have to pull back here, and there's an attack path that swings right around the top side, just like that. So a lot of what I'm thinking early on will involve is defending this choke point right here. I'm thinking a lot about how I defend that early, and my thought process is, I'm not going to worry too much about this early on. I'll sort of worry about that later. I won't affect my early build as long as I contain that choke. Think Medusa in Protoss vs. Zerg. Protoss early expands, ignores the fact that there's a bunch of temples at the backside of his base that Zerglings can bust down. A lot of reason to be calm if we can control this. What's my third base going to be? Well, I mean, this seems like a reasonable third base. Question is, when would I be opting for this one instead of this one? I think in a lot of circumstances, if you're opting for a ton of early aggression, This is a lot safer because you don't even actually need units there to defend from ground pushes. If you're doing a lot of super hyper-aggressive stuff, taking that as a third seems very safe. If you're doing a more slow, methodical center mid-game push, obviously taking this as your third and pushing along this route seems more than good. But what are any other considerations I want to make? Oh yeah, also if you're being very aggressive, expanding here, expanding where you're attacking, if you're doing a lot of air stuff or a lot of drop stuff. I don't know how common that's going to be in StarCraft 2, but these are really the things I'm thinking about. This control point is really all I'm going to worry too much about in these sort of destructible rocks. Now, one thing, let's not freak out too much about how the designers are playing. I'm going to. And if you listen to the commentary that's overlaid on this video, it's pretty... Whoopsie daisies, I accidentally scrolled down. It's pretty amazing how good of a job the StarCraft 2 designers do in terms of getting people excited. Whoops, opening up all sorts of jank all over the place. Yeah, I mean, they do a phenomenal job of just getting people excited for everything. So don't worry too much about the fact that, oh my god, these players might not be good. They're not showcasing the way it should be played at the highest level. That's what I'm going to be talking about right now, but this game itself is just a cool showcase of all the neat junk that goes on. And we're still going to have some useful stuff to say as well. So we have these Xel'Naga watchtowers, which I like quite a bit. I think it's really interesting. For those who aren't familiar with these, when you touch these, you get a big sight range boost. Again, this is another way of saying the more aggressive you are, the more we will reward you in this game. It's actually distracting to have their commentary up. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, so hopefully you guys don't mind too much. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in StarCraft 2 that rewards the aggressor. Anytime there's destructible terrain, anytime there's other sorts of stuff to take, like these Xel'Naga watchtowers, the aggressor is obviously going to have a huge benefit. And of course, look at our StarCraft 1 techniques working in StarCraft 2. Oh, all he needs now is to just build a pylon. Or, you know, since it's StarCraft 2, just build a Nexus. Just set things off on the right foot. Let them really know you mean business. So, of course, things scouting around. Now, what would be an appropriate way to respond? One of two things. One would be, ignore this. And actually, this is a big concept. Anytime there's something that's bugging you, and this is an obvious example, one way to do it is to think, how would I prevent this from ever happening in my next game, and do that. So, for instance, sending 2 drones right away. Or just have a planned response for when you do see that. So, for instance, I believe this is a hatchery going down right there. I dislike that quite a bit. You're basically completely sacrificing your economy. It might not feel like the biggest deal. You know, you're getting the hatchery down anyways, but it's the sort of thing that would screw me up a lot in StarCraft 1 when that sort of thing happens. A lot of your economy is timed around getting that early expansion, and that's just such a huge variation to do. So, of course, the little proby guy is scouting around. And while this stuff's going on, I do want to say that I have full confidence, after seeing some of these battle reports, that StarCraft 2 it's inevitable that it's going to be a phenomenally successful esports and or just esports game, because it appeals a lot to the observer. There is so much going on in these games that there's a lot we don't get to see, and that always really excites me. So we see a lot of stuff going down for Protoss. He appears to be teching. There's just one gateway in the cybernetics core. And this is very, very strong play. Just by the fact that he has seen his opponent, he has complete vision, he knows exactly what's up, he's teching. We're starting to see the power of scouting in this game. Zerg hasn't taken gas yet. In original StarCraft, we might be a little concerned about that. And chasing things down. One thing that, again, I'm going to emphasize as much as I possibly can in these early analyses. Anytime you're experiencing a new system, and by that I really mean any new game. So if you're playing Magic the Gathering for the first time, or playing any strategy game, or StarCraft 2 for the first time, you tend to think of the tactics, you tend to think of the base level, oh cool, I can do this, and that combines with that. You know, like for instance, when I first played StarCraft 1, I was going, oh man, a Terran dropship. If you always carry an SCV in that dropship, he can just unload and repair the dropship whenever, you want. And that actually kind of makes sense if you hear it and think about it just at first. But of course, we inevitably see in the history of StarCraft that is less than optimal. So, that's the issue, that people are going to obsess so much about tactics, which is normal, which is fine, but they're going to overlook the strategy that overarches everything. So we're going to see some infiltrators, or excuse me, not infiltrators, nullifiers as they're called this game. They're actually sentries, I believe, in the current build. But we're going to see some cool little tactics that these things abuse right here. But what I want to talk about is the strategy underlying them. So this I love. This is one of my favorite new features. You can't see past these, so you need to be careful. You can reinforce these areas so you don't know if your opponent's being there. So here come the first thing I want to talk about. Yeah, these force fields. Basically what the designers did is they create a force field which blocks certain regions of the map. So it's like creating terrain there. So it's almost like the reverse of destructible terrain. It's like constructible terrain, which I think is a wonderful idea, just taking mechanics they've seen in map design and making them stuff you can do in the game. But what a lot of people are going to see right there is they're going to go, oh my god, look, I can see the force field, and oh, I'm going to block an attack. And actually what we're going to see in a little bit, I think we're actually going to see it right here. I'll hold off on my big high-level thought until we see those. So it's a ranged unit early on, and they seem pretty fast, so a very microable unit. And maybe we'll get to see in a little bit, maybe not. But anyways, I'll just continue with that thought. People are going to obsess about the tactics of the force field early on. And what we're actually going to see in a little bit, I'll just cut straight to it, is that a bunch of Zerglings run in, and the Protoss uses a force field to wall the Zerglings into the mineral patch, and then the probes and the nullifier make short work of it. And I just think that was an absolutely beautiful choice by the Protoss player. But what I want to talk about now is a little bit more of the strategy involved. Let's actually just go to this unit cost list. Look at the Sentry, which is the nullifier in the game we're watching. Notice that it's primarily Vespene gas that it uses. This is the sort of thing that we want to think a lot about, how our resources are being distributed throughout the game. So right there, that high Vespene gas cost tells me if you mass a bunch of sentries early on, you're going to get a whole bunch of minerals that you can use on other things, like expanding, or if you wanted to do some sort of harassment with Sentry, you'd get a whole bunch of money to build defenses somewhere else, or to tech if you wanted to. Sentry seems like a good unit to allow you to do some mineral plan. So really, when I see this high gas count, I always want to say, well, what is the mineral counterpart plan to that? We see this stuff in Starcraft 1 all the time. A player who early expands and turtles up really hard and gets a bunch of defense is going to like getting High Templar to bolster that defense, because all the minerals are being spent on one thing, expanding defenses, teching, gateways. What's all the gas being spent on? Well, we're going to save it up, get some upgrades, and then get the Templar out. Notice how we're just thinking about the balance of resources. So I think that's a very cute thing to think about already in this game, is how these nullifiers are being used to allow this expansion. We see this expansion coming up. Part of me wants to go, ooh, is that too early? Is that too late? These are the sorts of things that you would discover during testing. But I can already tell you, I like the fact that the Protoss player is going for these nullifier units. Oh, by the way, here's a tactic right here that I was referring to. Look at that. Oh my god. Walling the Zerglings in. Oh, probes and the nullifier making short work of it. Beautiful, beautiful play by the Protoss player. But again, that's a tactic. The strategy that I like behind the nullifiers is that this force field can wall off anything that's too threatening. In particular, it can wall off this choke right here, and we can just get some shots off there. And while our money is stockpiling, we can expand. Very cool strategy that emerges just from thinking about the distribution of resources. So that's something that I almost certainly am going to play with when I start playing Starcraft 2 beta, which I have a beta key for, thanks to BlizzCon. I didn't get it because I'm a celebrity or because I have a good hookup. I get it because I spent $150 along with a bunch of other nerds to sign up for BlizzCon. Just for the record, I was 13th in the queue. How's that for F5ing to get a ticket? Oh man, 300 APM purchasing BlizzCon tickets. So yeah, look, yet more aggression. See, you are rewarded for aggression in this game, because you can do things like destroy the buildings, you can do things like take these Xel'Naga watchtowers. But again, let me back up a little bit. When I play SC2 beta, one of the biggest things I'm going to think about is strategies that I can develop by just thinking of distribution of resources. So I'll just throw a dart at a board of StarCraft units and say, I wonder if I can make a lot of that units. Oh, look, that unit costs a lot of minerals. What am I going to do with the gas? And then by trying to answer that question, I can start to think, well, can I get a legitimate strategy out of this? So see, look, this is some nice early harassment here. Look at this, this is very fancy. Oh, force field, and then they get trapped and they burrow. Oh, lots of cool stuff going on, lots of dynamic battles that can occur in this game. This, I was a little concerned about. I think one of the biggest mistakes that you consistently see at the, I guess I'd say the C to B level on Icy Cup, is people who get obsessed with run-bys, in particular against Zerg. So I'll just use that as the example. So Zerg player has a bunch of Sunken colonies. The Terran player goes, oh my god, I can try to run Medic Marine by there. Or the Protoss player is like, oh, I can run 12 Speed Zealots by there. And even though a lot of times you can, what often ends up happening is that those units get trapped inside the Zerg's base, and the Zerg just kills you off, and you're at this huge, huge loss. That said, what we're seeing right here is a nice little run-by, and look at this cool tactic. We get to block it off. I'm not going to panic too much about the fact that these are pretty much dead sentries. I would think of this similar to, let's say, Vulture Harass in Terran vs. Zerg, where the Terran intentionally runs 4 or 5 vultures in there, knowing that they're eventually going to die, but in the meantime just trying to do as much damage as possible. So look at the nullifiers seeming to have infinite energy, just blocking this sort of stuff off. Cool, great, awesome. You know what I'm focusing on? Not so much this stuff, but look at this expansion that was able to get thrown up in the meantime. Very cool thing. And again, how would someone like you develop this strategy? Well, why not just think of the gas mineral distribution? Going for those sentries, predominantly gas, frees up minerals to expand. Can I use the sentries as well to delay and to get in his face and to distract him to further secure my expansion? Absolutely, it looks like. We're going to see some of the Dragoon analog, these Stalkers, coming up here. And notice that they literally cost the exact same amount as a Dragoon. So, reasonable... Oops, sorry, that's part 2. Yeah, a reasonable decision for the Protoss player would be to go back and to be getting some Stalkers after this. And what I also like is that with that mineral freedom, they can build an extra gateway and get a little bit more infrastructure set up there. Again, same logic as how we like to get Templar to defend us, and that frees up minerals for gateways. We can use those sentries early on to free up a little bit of fancy-smancy minerals for us, so we can get these Stalkers. And look, we have some nice micro going on. Again, very cool dynamic battles happen in StarCraft 2, it appears. And I do want to pause briefly right now, and whoopsie daisies. A question I have is, what is the purpose of this push right here? We saw what seemed to be, or I should say, we were able to identify a purpose of that early sentry run in from Protoss. It secured the expansion, it allowed them to get all this other stuff coming, and with this attack coming up for Zerg, Protoss looks pretty prepared. And the big question for Zerg is, what is Zerg's goal with this? A lot of new players are just going to love the fact that they have new units to play around with and are going to be as aggressive as they possibly can, and they're going to end up with a whole bunch of stupid losses. That's always been the biggest mistake in every strategy game I've pretty much ever played, is people just wanting to just get units and kill you because it's fun to attack. But think of the sort of vocabulary we get used to using, timing pushes. That's really timed attacking, right? We want to make sure that when we attack, it's not only at a vulnerable period of time, but also we can do something else. So with this attack, let's just see what happens right here. I actually have watched this game in advance. Oh, look at that. I love that sentry, or a nullifier in this game, just blocking off those roaches, locking them in. And, you know, at this point in time, I think this is good decision-making by the Zerg to, you know, just try to take a few shots. I'd prefer to retreat up here a little bit. One thing I would be real concerned about is Protoss. This is the sorts of stuff I'm thinking. Remember how I was mentioning earlier on that this is kind of out of the way? Zerg now is attacking, and look at this little small area. This area is where that sentry threw down that void, or that force void or force field, trapping everything here. I'm wondering perhaps why the Zerg didn't try to push down here and then loop around back here. That's a very common technique I call a cut-in StarCraft 1 that actually works really well in any strategy game. When you have two bases, you attack between them, or you force him to one base, and then you attack the other one. We can clearly see how you can get a lot of advantage right here. If you move this way with the Zerg units, you can cut all the way back up here, and then not only do you get high ground advantage, But we've also cut some Protoss units in half, right? So you can get a really good opportunity to perhaps do some damage up here, or just constantly freak them out, make them bring units up here, attack away from this nice defensive positioning. So I like the fact that these roaches eventually come up here. That's pretty cool, that blink ability. And these warp gates just sending a whole bunch of units right there. Real cool stuff. So it looks like Zerg is about to break it just barely, but he has to retreat. Oh no. And we actually, I just want to rewind a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see, but there are actually more Zerg units just streaming down. And that's a big issue. Again, when you do a big attack, just constantly thinking, oh my god, if I send more units, maybe I can win right now. But be very careful when you're starting off with these sorts of attacks to make sure you're trying to learn as much as you can from them. As we're seeing right now, the Protoss is just dominating this. Just, oh my god, they're on the run, and here comes another blink. I just think this blink is so cool. And bam! Oh, baby, that's so sweet. So I'm absolutely not arguing that you shouldn't do that sort of early aggression of Zerg. Instead, what you should do is you should say, what was my goal with this? Was it to try to just kill him right now? And if the answer is yes, that's fine. Just make sure you know that that's what you're testing. Feel free to do all these sorts of wild attacks, so that way you can cross off a whole bunch of bad attack times, and that way you can very rapidly discover when a timing push is. Be aware that this is a specific attack timing. I am attacking directly after a bunch of sentries messed with me at my front. Then I'm going to do a counterattack. And if it works like this, I would, in my head, say, I do not want to do a counterattack after a bunch of sentries invade my base. I want to do something else. And all of a sudden, I am slowly advancing, or I shouldn't say slowly, you're pretty quickly advancing towards a good timing attack. Timing. And then, same idea of Protoss. Is Protoss really in the best shape to try to do a counterattack here? As we're clearly going to see, absolutely not. Look at the Protoss getting demolished. So I'm seeing two concerns. One from each player. Both players seem to just attack whenever they feel like the ball's in their court. Like Zerg probably feels like the ball's in his court right now. Just killed off a whole bunch of Protoss units. And we do in fact see the Zerg just swinging right back there to attack. That seems a little bit senseless to me. So just to recap everything, we're seeing a lot of just attacking, which, for the designer's purpose, for Destin Browder and Robert Simpson, who are commentating on this, they're just trying to get everyone as excited about the game as they can, and look at all 700 of you and me, I'm just like, ooh, getting all pumped up. So they did a great job in regards to that. But let's just think about it from the how do we win perspective. And in that regard, be very careful with when you move out with your attacks. Make sure that it's either a timing that you've established, or that you're trying to practice the timing, not that you're just trying to attack willy-nilly. So I don't exactly know what unit is doing what, but one of these air units lifted that queen up into the air, and the other one just blasted it to oblivion. So again, more cute things going on like that. But yeah, see, look, here's another attack like that. Makes for an unbelievably entertaining game to watch. But remember, games are not about fun, they are about winning. And see, look, Zerg pushed Protoss back, and then he's coming back up here. I like that quite a bit. Maybe even committing slightly less to that attack. So I'm seeing this is vulnerable. These cannons seem to have this back stuff covered pretty well. This front warp gate might look like a nice juicy target. Because, you can even do little things. This is very Mutalisk-like of me, where you have the roaches attacking this one building, and then you have the Zerglings just sort of hanging out, ready to surround anything that comes up. Nice little tactical abuses that we can do. And all this is me basically saying, this expansion and this expansion share a choke that's pretty damn far away from them. How can that be abused? Well, by camping out in this area. Very nice little analysis that we can make thanks to Oh, excuse me. Oh, my pizza almost came back up. Oh, but once again, nice little bit of analysis that we can get from Starcraft 1. There seems to be a button that's show life of everything ever made. And oh my god, okay, I just want to state for the record that this is sweet. This attack by Zerg I like quite a lot. Watch this. Baneling's going for the mineral line. Zerg just gets Reavers now. Oh yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Taking out that photon cannon. Oh man, that was sweet. So again, let's pause and think just a moment. Tactically, that was kick-ass, right? Banelings getting into a probe line? Oh, yeah, right? And we even see people screw this up in StarCraft 1 as well. I'm arguing that that may have been a big blunder. Again, I don't know definitively because I've never played StarCraft 2 before. But notice that the Zerg lost about 12, 14 Zerglings, 4 or 5 roaches in that attack to kill off, I guess, 7, 8 probes and some cannons. And then Protoss got to clean all that up. Was that the best idea in the world? Well, think of, a lot of players who suicide a shuttle with 2 Zealots and a Reaver just to go in there and to kill off a bunch of probes. And they might do that, but they're pretty much killing off 8 or 9 probes to completely lose any sort of map control at that point in time. They've lost their Reaver, they've lost their shuttle. They're in not so good shape. So again, be careful with those tactics. It's very visually and just viscerally rewarding to see all that stuff explode. But be very careful, because as we're going to see right now, the Protoss really looks like he has the initiative right now. Protoss is going to have the freedom to advance forward. And here is a nice little timing push that we can do. One thing that worries me a little bit, if I'm playing this game right here, is that if I open this up for an attack, what it means is that this expansion is very vulnerable. That is one of the biggest consequences of opening this up. If I had just expanded here and never taken this out, look at how beautifully all 3 of these bases are defended. I just need to rally stuff here, I position stuff here, Zerg tries to attack the front, I get to repel him. But the instant these come down, this becomes very, very weak, and the main and this expansion become a little bit weakened as well. So if I'm attacking along this line, where do I think is a better spot to expand? Probably here or here. That's a big consideration for me if I'm doing that sort of thing. And Banelings. God, Banelings are sweet. I just cannot wait for this beta to come out. I just, literally, for like my first few days, all I'm going to do is make Banelings and fist pump whenever I kill a bunch of probes. And then, since I'm losing, I'll pause it and set it to X-ray latency and leave. Just already developing my game plans in advance. So we're going to be killing all this off. Nice little good unit mixture. This is a concept that I call backteching. We're only now seeing the Zealots be made, and Zealots, I believe, are the lowest level unit for Protoss. I will refer to the SC2 Armory. Yes, they are indeed the lowest level unit. Just 100 minerals, same way as in StarCraft 1. But when I say backtech, I mean you tech to the higher level thing first, and then you back up. Protoss vs. Terran. You tech up to Dragoons with range and observers. You're making just Dragoons for a long time because it manages a small push as well. It manages the Vultures and the Mines well. And then you back up and you get a whole bunch of Zealots with speed because they really crush tanks. What we saw here is Protoss got a whole bunch of Sentries early on to mess with them a bunch. Then he expanded and he got some Stalkers to deal with some early threats so he could micro with that blink ability. And now it looks like he's getting a bunch of Zealots and he's able to muscle his way into this Zerg base. So another tool that we want to think about, how we can adjust our compositions over time. Oh, here comes the burrow. Oh, I just got to turn this up. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, get ready. Oh, that was fantastic. Oh, man, that was sweet. All right, I'm going to turn it down and get back to business. Oh, I love watching things blow up. Oh, man. I think every single strategy game should have at least 7 Reaver-like units in it for each race. Just having every unit be like a Reaver in one way or another can't be bad. Loving this Queen unit design. I just think it's a very cool looking unit. A very interesting idea. For those of you who are unaware, the Queen is a unit that basically helps the Zerg macro. They cast a spell that causes more larvae to pop off that hatch. So, they can also attack, so it's a nice little defensive unit early on. So you know what? I've already developed a build that I want to test, having seen this, all this stuff happen early on. The Queen is something that helps me with my macro and helps me with my defense. So I'm going to try to think of some way to expand early on and perhaps get 2 Queens and try to just block my choke, prevent anything from getting up there, prevent any sort of sentry attack, and try to get a very, very quick third and have a big-ass macro game. And I'll also be doing some teching, and then later on I'll go back and add more hatcheries and more units. But basically a very defensive structure revolving around queens. Cool, I have something I want to test. All because I know now that the queen not only helps my macro, but helps me defend. Something I want to test out now. Cool. And then after that, what I would do is I would look up how much resources does the queen take. And given this build, what sort of resource will I be high on? What will I have the excess of? And I'll try to think of some way to spend that. And I'm actually going to pause again and talk even more about that. I don't know how many of you have been playing Starcraft since, I guess I want to say 2003, 2004. But in that era, about the 2000, pretty much pre-2005, especially pre-Flash, Terran players just let their gas get very, very high against Protoss opponents. What the Terran player would do is he would early expand, no matter how he opened, he would get the expansion before he made a third factory. And then after the Terran got that expansion, he would add on up to about 5 or 6 factories, occasionally 7. And all Terran vs. Protoss play revolved around big mid-game pushes. And if the Terran had gas as natural, he would get the geyser, and that would help him speed his push up a little bit because he had all the extra gas for the factories. But other than that, that was pretty much what the Terran spent gas on. Those extra factories and those tanks. And then after this big mid-game push, the Terran would then, much later, get 2 armories and upgrade +1/+1, and then +2/+2. So what you'd see in a lot of games was Terran would have like 1,500 gas and no money, and everyone on the planet was like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's the way it happens. Yeah, don't worry about that. Flash, on the other hand, said, well, how can I figure out a way to spend that gas? And then he developed his beautiful +2/+1 timing attack build where he spent every ounce of gas that he had. And nowadays, Terrans just are desperate for gas. They know all the ways that they can sneak in extra dropships, a starport, the extra upgrades. All this came by someone saying, man, that's dumb. I don't think we should have 1,500 gas standard in this matchup. But again, it's so easy to fall into those mindsets when your mid-game timing pushes are seeming to work so well. You ignore what would be the next step. So I want to make sure that you are all beginning with that next step in mind right away. Just thinking about resource distribution. And, this is starting to seem like a nice, a more normal timing attack. Banelings being unbelievably sweet as usual. But one thing I like is that in this attack, queens are defending. Kill the queen. I'll actually back that up as we're watching this attack. Nullifier's going down. And Deflam taking him out. But yeah, see, target firing these queens. A lot of, I think, early timing pushes that are going to develop will be around attacking when the Zerg player might have more queens than other units, because as we saw one queen fall there, and we're going to keep watching. There's another queen falling. A little bit of mind control action going on. But yeah, 3 queens falling, 4 queens falling, that's going to be a big dent in the macro. And, it's almost like losing a Tiberium Harvester, for any of you CNC fans. It's just, I can't imagine it doing anything but sucking. And look how fast Zerglings are, and nothing makes me happier than seeing a unit that is that fast. It's almost like looking at Magneto in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and going, how did the designers think that this was fair? Oh, man. God, I'm making like a badrillion other StarCraft game references today. Or should I say non-StarCraft game references today. Zergling's running around, skirting in. It's going to pull out. That's the sort of stuff I really like to see. And look, going in there and then going for the main, trying to pick off any excessive stuff. Doing a lot of contain work, but again, since this area is open, I'm thinking of how I can abuse that as much as possible. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this expansion. Notice, if you look at the mini-map, no scouting by the Zerg player to check those bottom expansions. My goodness, players love sneaking expansions in SC1. God, it feels weird to call it StarCraft 1, but gonna have to start. And this is some Night Cubes placement. Why do we like this placement? Not just because it hides these buildings. Yeah, hidden buildings are always a little bit useful. But because it gives us vision of right here. Remember how important this choke point is? And that's one thing I really love about Protoss' play. He's getting vision of this location after he's taken out this one. This pylon was going down at about the same time that the Protoss player was clearing out this lane. Very, very excellent planning right there. Sending out some probes, just going to check stuff out. Getting control of those Xel'Naga watchtowers. Looks like he can just get control of this tower to potentially watch for this expansion. Warp Prism is like the, it's basically an arbiter, really. In terms of recall, you can get a whole bunch of units in there. So look at that. Oh, big massive army from the Zerg. Oh, and Colossi are awesome. Reminds me of War of the Worlds. And this, oh, look at this. More sweet tactical work. Now this is a tactic you're going to want to incorporate into your play. Forcing your opponent to be funneled into smaller areas so that you can, do happy things with them. So, if nullifiers, or should I say sentries, turn out to be awful in the later stages, or in the early stages of the game, we would just incorporate them later into the play, and that would be fine. But again, if you can, think of these little tactics and think of how to expand them into whole strategies that can be employed. Never confuse tactics with strategy. And then he mind controls those two Colossi, which is unbelievably kick-ass. So there's a lot of units being made by Zerg, and Zerg always has that trade-off of, am I going to make drones, am I going to build my economy, or am I going to make a bunch of units? That's why we see a lot of Zerg players who do things like favor lurkers, mutalisks, and drones, so that way they can have the opportunity to buy really expensive units that cost one larva and then spend all the other larva on drones. Instead of doing this mass Zergling or mass Hydrals defense, which really, really eats into the drone count. So whenever I see a lot of units, I sort of get concerned, like, because I think that's very important as a Zerg player to think about when this trade-off is going to happen. So just a general note of powering right there. Same concept applies to back-teching in general. Ooh, look, and splitting it up and taking out the expansion. Cool little double-pronged attack right there, but I hate to reference the flavors of the races because they're so arbitrary. So, for instance, Zerg is the fast, many unit that are weak race, which generally turns out not to exactly be the way they work. But still, given that that is their intended flavor, it bugs me a little bit that Protoss is able to do a drop at this back expansion and kill it off a lot, and then kill it off, period, I should say. And also at the bottom, the Protoss is able to attack this bottom expansion as well. I'm kind of thinking now, where is the Zerg's general bigness here? And I think it's just the fact that the Zerg player was doing so much aggression early on, making so many units, and as a showcase for fans, this game's perfect. Designers could have done a better job making a more exciting game. If this were my game as Zerg, I would instead be thinking, how is it that I let this stuff happen? And honestly, I would say that the attacking is the biggest result. A lot of times players will say, well, I didn't make enough units. I need to make even more units than I did before. And I think that's a big step in the wrong direction. And the reason this step in the wrong direction happens is because they never stop and say, my attacks were really bad. I should not have done these attacks. And I think that's a very useful thing to do, to stop and say, well, is this attack really necessary, or could have I just expanded? Opt for the more economic path, and as we're going to see, the Zerg is going to good game right away. No big deal. One thing I also want to just gripe on just briefly, remember how I was focusing a lot on Protoss. I said Protoss destroys this. What does that mean? It means it makes this expansion very weak. The same goes for the Zerg player. Notice that the Protoss just stayed holed up on these two bases. Fantastic, because when he broke this down, suddenly Protoss was threatening this front area and this area by just waltzing Zealots down there. By breaking this down, he made this Zerg expansion very weak. So, just to think about it from the flip side, if I'm Zerg and I'm expanding here, here, and here, I need to be aware of this stuff falling, or I need to get Mutalisks, some sort of air units to try to kill this off, or just, try to be as aggressive as possible to control this region. So I'm going to go ahead and come back here and unmute the chat, and I'm happy to take some questions right now. Tomorrow we're doing just a regular StarCraft 1 game analysis, but starting Wednesday and Thursday we're doing 2 more analyses. So Wednesday we're doing 1, and Thursday we're doing a StarCraft 2 analysis. So let's go ahead and just let the chat fill up with some questions, and then I'll mute the chat once again, and I'll take some of them. Whoopsie daisies, my Procaster be lagging. So I think this is a reasonable question. Oh, man. Okay, I just want to briefly say Procaster just updated their software, and it's really good. I really like Procaster. But they made banning very easily. And I keep wanting to highlight people's questions so I can read it a little bit better. And it's being like, do you want to permanently ban this person? I'm like, oh, Jesus, no, back out. So if any of you get inadvertently banned, just let me know, and I'll fix that. So let's go ahead and briefly mute the chat. There we go. So the Lich says, oh, wonderful question. I noticed that StarCraft 2 maps have 2 gas at each base. Does this mean that most StarCraft 2 strategies are going to be tech-based? Here is one, I think, a lot of people are not going to do this, and they totally should. Watch Haya versus Zhangbi on Moonglaive. In that game, Haya, he takes his natural expansion, and he gets gas at that expansion very quickly. He mines a little bit of gas, and then he stops. He mined a little bit of gas so he could get enough to build up to 5 factories so he could do this really monstrously kick-ass mid-game push. But he only needed a little bit of gas. He just needed enough gas to build those few extra factories, and then he was done. He was only making tanks and vultures, which doesn't really require that many gas. So, I think that these 2 gas geysers open up a lot of options, and one of the sweetest things I think that players should employ in StarCraft 2 is builds that get 2 geysers early on, mine enough from both to get a tech-based strategy going, and then pull all the guys off 1 geyser. I think that's going to be a very, very useful technique in StarCraft 2, and that's one thing I really enjoy. And this actually relates back to a question M said. M says, as a pro, thank you, I'm flattered that you think I am one. What do you think about the modern additions made to StarCraft 2 that make it more noob-friendly and even out the playing field a bit? For instance, rallying drones onto minerals, mass-building control groups for easy macro, unlimited unit selection, etc. I'm going to tie this back into Lich's question a little bit. Really, my opinion on anything Blizzard does in this regard is that if it frees up time, as long as they are having interesting things going on that I can spend my time on, I'm happy with it. If Blizzard makes multiple building selections super easy and macroing suddenly, not an issue at all, they have freed up all this time I would have spent macroing. And if I do it, by, for instance, taking drones off my second assimilator or managing that second assimilator a little bit more, maybe having to go back with my queen to build more larvae all the time. These are other things that are also taking time. It doesn't bother me really at all. And honestly, I just trust Blizzard. Blizzard tends not to screw their games up. I mean, Warcraft 3 came on the tails of Starcraft and still had a robust pro gaming scene for a long time and was unbelievably fun to play. So I'm obviously very, 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 very pumped. Okay, so Broody says, Day 9. Do you think that Protoss has too many spells or abilities over other races that scream imbalance? For example, fast blinks, not just used defensively as seen here, but also offensively. Try to think tactically of all the options that are provided with blink alone. And of course, he's telling me to cast my beta games, and I will. I'm eager to do that. These are my thoughts on imbalance in general. I think that this is just the sort of pre-beta hype that's going to happen, where people are getting really worried and concerned about design imbalances and this sort of thing. And the example I will use for all of this is the island map Estrella in WCG 2004 and 5. Everyone seems to say island maps suck for Zerg in StarCraft 1. They say, Zerg doesn't get a second expansion up really early on. They actually have the hardest time of the 3 races getting drop. And, so Zerg players rush for drop, and then their expansions die really easily. And they're like, this is horrible for Zerg. So what Zergs do is they just scream imbalance, and then they never worry about it ever again. What I did in those games is I actually practiced it so much. I actually remember playing over 1,000 or 2,000 games just on island maps, just Hall of Valhalla, Estrella. These games, just playing it over and over and over and over again, and I developed this immense comfort with the maps to where in a tournament when they said, Day, you're going to be playing on Estrella, I would go, oh, thank God, Zerg vs Terran, Zerg vs Protoss on Estrella. Okay, I get that matchup now. And with any of the abilities here in StarCraft 2, you need so many games to be able to accurately declare if something is imbalanced or not that I can't really have an opinion on it right now. Again, I want to be very deferential to the Blizzard designers. I think Dustin Browder and I believe Robert Simpson also works on the game. I just trust them. I think they're going to do a fantastic job, and I think they're aware of these sorts of issues. What I would say is that it creates all sorts of cool, fun opportunities for me, the player, to do. Oh, I'm going to be blinking like crazy. So let's just go ahead and take a few more things. So Colossus says, when trying to make a build for StarCraft 2, should the emphasis be, I see a weakness at this particular time. How do I exploit it? Or should it be something like, how can I employ the sweet abilities of Banelings in the mid-game? I'm very happy that you used Banelings as the choice, because they are indeed sweet. I think that those are actually fantastic starting points. You know, like, this seems weak. How do I exploit it? And honestly, I think that the one thing people are not going to do is get a buddy and just try stuff out. A lot of people are just going to play and play and play and try all this stuff, and they're going to read, oh, what's the cool hip strategy? And they're going to go, I'm doing that. And then when they go win a game against someone, they're like, ha, I'm the best player in the world now. But, you know, doing that exact thing where you say, hey, I see a weakness right here. Hey, Tristan, can you play some games with me and do this exact thing? Because I'm feeling like you're really weak here. And then I might find some way to puncture a hole in that defense and go, oh, I have achieved learning. And then after a while, you'll be able to sort of tuck that away into your repertoire of knowledge. And even if that strategy never gets used, it will always crop up in some fashion, perhaps years later. Like, mech was so popular in 2001, 2002. I have so much experience against mech from then. And then in the last 2 years, people suddenly have decided to play mech again. And I have just immense comfort with it, thanks to the fact that I had this knowledge that I tucked away so long ago. Or also, how do I employ the sweet abilities of Banelings? I also think that's a very useful thing to do that relates back to what I was saying earlier. Pick a unit, say, this unit's awesome. How do I center my build around it? Whether it be making masses of that unit, making 2 or 3 of that units very quickly at this key time. Fantastic ideas there, Colossus. I'm going to steal them. Let's see. And Terrace, asking some good tactical questions, says, when the Roaches were retreating from attacking the Stalkers, would it have been good tactic to burrow the heavily damaged ones to save them? I would say absolutely there should have been some burrowing going on. But remember, from a designer standpoint, they want to show how awesome Blink is, and they succeeded. I remember fist pumping a little bit there myself. So let's see a little bit. We got some repeat questions. Let's see. Scooter says, the idea of queens versus hatches to macro. Do you think that the fact that queen seems to die faster makes it a bad idea to get it? Excuse me. I think that, again, that's something that should be explored and experimented with. But in general, I actually am the sort of player that loves fragility in play. I always like the weak character or the weak unit that does a ton of damage. That's like my favorite thing to do. And I think that it's it's oftentimes underrated how much efficiency there is there. And I just say, feel free to stretch it to the limit, Feel free to say, I really need to play perfectly with these queens in order to get my build to work. Because, you'll be able to do it if you practice enough. Let's see. Wonderful question by Klons says, do you think in real StarCraft 2 games, the high-yield resources will be utilized more? Whoopsie daisies, I just scrolled right past this question. Whoops. Do you think that the high-yield resource patches will be used more? God, I gotta mute this chat. Okay, so Procaster is a nice tool. Whenever someone types something new, it just pings right to the bottom of the chat, so I'm trying to read one that's higher up. So Klon says, okay, do you think that in real StarCraft 2 games, the high-yield resources will be utilized more than the battle reports show? And how much of an advantage do you think it will give? The high-yield resources, from what I've seen in the StarCraft maps, it's like the expansion that the map control player gets to take. They'll sometimes have a neutral building blocking it, or it'll just be like far away. So I think that there will be a lot of techniques that revolve around trying to get those early on. And the way I think to do it would be to get a lot of high mobility units early on, so that way you can mess with your opponent, and then to have enough sort of versatility with your unit mix afterwards that you're okay. Let's actually pretend that high yield resources existed in StarCraft 1. We'd build a whole bunch of mutalisks, we'd be flying them all over the place, harassing. Then we'd get lurkers at all our bases to defend them, so whenever he came to attack somewhere, we'd have some lurkers, some defenses, and all those mutalisks there. And I think that it's going to be... I think that it's obviously going to be a huge advantage for the map control player. So either the StarCraft 2 designers have already considered this, and it's fine, it's not a big deal. But if for some reason the StarCraft 2 designers haven't, let's say that when the game starts, that high yield resource will be way stronger than we'd imagined. There's other techniques that I think will pop up, like making a neutral building that's right there be so strong that you can't just rush to kill it or something like that. For instance, on Medusa, there's a zillion stacked temples behind your base as opposed to just one or something like that. So let's just go ahead and take one more question. I actually like this question. I'll just take this as the last question. Do you think the stock maps will offer the variety of gameplay that the StarCraft community expects, or do you think that they will be useless until custom maps come out? So what Devious, I guess is how I'm going to say it, what Devious is referring to is how when Blizzard initially released StarCraft 1, they had a ton of maps, but really the only map that people played was Lost Temple and Rivalry were really the only two extensively played maps. Dire Straits, was a fun map for a while, but pretty quickly got tossed out. But I think that Blizzard really gets the way that modern map design works, and we're seeing them employ all these techniques here. We see these neutral buildings here. They're also extending it by making the Xel'Naga watchtowers and this sort of thing. They're even giving abilities of map making to units, such as the Sentry's ability to create those little blocking force fields. So what I would say is that I think it will set the benchmark for interesting games. I think that, if it ends up lasting long enough, StarCraft 2 does, then map makers will obviously start creating yet more and more and more and more map mechanics to sort of spice things up. But I fully expect that the initial maps are going to be awesome. I mean, think a little bit back to, how StarCraft 1 map making worked. That originally it was people experimenting around with ideas, and then natural expansions. Oh, that's a cool idea. And then easily defendable expansions, and then really close by island expansions, but a mineral patch blocking it, so Terran can't float there early. And then we start having neutral buildings being thrown in the way. And then we have like Troy with reverse wall offs. Now we have like these chrysalises all over the place, and neutral buildings blocking thing, and inverted ramps have been invented, and all sorts of cool stuff going on. It's just continuing to expand from there. So you know what? I'm pumped. I sincerely hope I only half hope it comes out tomorrow, because to be honest, I have a lot of work to do this week, and I won't do any of it if the beta comes out. My teachers will be like, Sean, where's your 3 prototypes for today? I'll be like, I played StarCraft. And they'll be like, oh, that's actually a pretty good reason. At least I hope so. I can dream. So you know what, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 69. I can't help but giggle because I'm juvenile. Day 9 Daily number 68 is going to go on after this. We're doing a regular StarCraft 1 cast tomorrow, and on Wednesday and Thursday, StarCraft 2 analysis all the way. Thanks so much. Yes, love Thug Snap. Thanks so much, everyone, and peace out.